The Atlanta Braves were quiet at the trade deadline, but Spencer Strider was loud on Tuesday night against the Los Angeles Angels. We'll discuss all of that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jacob Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at shortstopball. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at bravestoday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. Make sure if you're new, you subscribe on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button if you're watching this video there, as it does help support the show a ton. And when you do that, thank you so much for all your comments in the comment section there. We have some great discussions. I try to get to all of those, but you have been so generous with the comments. And again, really appreciate you continuing the conversation in the comment section on YouTube. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Thanks so much to all my everydayers. I know I owe a lot of you a shout out, and I promise I will get to those, but didn't have time to include it in today's episode, but I will on tomorrow's episode. We got a lot to get to in this one. I want to quickly recap Tuesday's game. A lot to get into there with Spencer Strider, but I mainly want to focus on the trade deadline, what the Braves did do, what they didn't do, who improved the most, what is the outlook for the National League, and who all got better at the trade deadline. I want to discuss all that on today's episode. Before we do, though, let me tell you about Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Let's go ahead and get into Tuesday's game, because I want to kind of go this a little bit quickly, because I want to get into the trade deadline discussion, which I'm sure a lot of you are wanting to hear. But was a good game on Tuesday, a 5-1 win over the Angels to even up that series. Spencer Strider, dominant again. You look at his last 8 starts now, 51 innings pitched, 18 earned runs. That's a 3.18 ERA. Just 44 hits allowed, only 8 walks. That's a 1.02 whip. So a 3.18 ERA, a 1.02 whip over his last 8 starts. And that's including, those starts here recently where he gave up 5, he gave up 4. But really, since those back-to-back really bad starts he had earlier in the year where he gave up 8 and 5 in consecutive outings, since then, he's looked a lot more like Spencer Strider. Still having issues with the home run balls and given that crooked inning and not being able to get through the 7th, which we'll talk about, but still, he has been more like that dominant Spencer Strider. And you look at those 51 innings in his last 8 starts, 81 strikeouts. And that's always been there for Spencer Strider. But again, especially over this 8-start stretch that he's had, he has been the dominant Spencer Strider we're accustomed to seeing. He's gone at least 6 innings in each of those 8 starts. He's worked into the 7th 5 times. He's only completed the 7th 1 time, which again, we'll talk about here more in a second. But he has been that ace. He has been that top of the rotation pitcher that the Braves need him to be. Yeah, there's still some things I'd like to see him improve on to become even more dominant. And I think there's more in the tank. And that just speaks to how great I think he can be and how great I think Spencer Strider can be. You can see the last time he's left these last 2 games, he's been frustrated with himself. He knows there's more in the tank. He knows he can be even better, which is just scary to think about and has to be scary for opposing teams. Going back to the 7th inning situation, talked about it previous 2 starts before this one against the Diamondbacks, against Boston, really struggled to get through that 7th inning. Things kind of unraveled on him in that 7th inning. Snick gave him a chance, even though he was approaching 100 pitches, to go back out in the 7th inning again on Tuesday, which I like and I agree with. You got to give Spencer Strider, I just said he's your ace, he's your most dominant pitcher. You got to keep giving him opportunities to work through that, and he can do it. We know he can do it. He did it last year. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's become a mental hurdle. I don't know what the cause is, but it's now 3 straight starts where things have started to unravel for him a little bit in that 7th inning. You go to the 7th inning on Tuesday night. He's up 0-2 on Mickey Moniak. He's blown away with 2 fastballs up in the zone. He goes back to it a third time, which I get, and I think it's the right pitch selection, and it was a good pitch, but Moniak makes the adjustment. He's able to get up to that ball and has one of the hardest hit balls of the night off of him for a leadoff single in the 7th. He gets the next 2 guys out, and you got the number 9 hitter out, and you're thinking, okay, here's a chance for him to get out of that 7th inning, and he hits Neto, who clearly took exception to it. I can promise you it wasn't intentional, but I'm sure getting hit up around the neck area is pretty frustrating for any hitter, but again, just couldn't get out of it. And you got to go to Joe Jimenez there to get out of that jam. And again, you saw Strider coming off the mound frustrated because, again, I got to think it's somewhat of a mental thing at this point now. 3 games in a row where he's gone into the 7th inning but couldn't complete it. So hopefully he continues to get those opportunities because that means he's really been good for 6 innings. If he's having an opportunity to go through the 7th, you want to see your ace be able to get you through 7 innings pretty frequently. And I think he has the ability to do. I know he has the ability to do that, but again, got to work through that, figure it out. 31 whiffs on the night. I can't tell you how incredible it is to have a game, and he's done it multiple times, where you have over 30 swings and misses and 110 pitches that he threw, a 48% whiff rate on the night. Again, it's dominant type stuff. 81.1 mile per hour average exit velocity against on the balls that were put into play. Just 4 hard hit balls allowed on the night, and only one of those hard hit balls went for a hit. The run that scored was on a 67.5 mile per hour bloop single. He gave up a couple of those just really weak hits that are frustrating, and that was the run that came around to score. Big thing for Strider here, didn't give up a home run. First time he's done that in his last 4 starts. We know that's something that's really plagued him this year. His home run rate has doubled since last year. Again, not really sure what's going on with that other than just fastball location, and batters are trying to cheat to get to that fastball a lot more. Almost gave up one in this one. CJ Cron hit a ball 400 feet to dead center field, and fortunately, he hit it in that exact location. Michael Harris was able to glide back and get that for an easy out, but no home runs on the night. Anytime Spencer Strider does that, he's going to have a really good outing because it's hard to string a bunch of hits against him. You got to hope the defense helps you out like it did against the White Sox, where Rosario, his defensive lapses in left field really hurt him in that one, or you're going to have to hope that he walks a couple batters before you get a home run like that game in Arizona, or he hits a batter. So again, avoiding the home run, avoiding that big inning. Spencer Strider able to do that. Another dominant performance, broke his own record as the fastest pitcher to get to 200 strikeouts in a season. He's going to break a lot of records in his Braves career. I certainly think so. I mentioned if he gets the starts, I think he's going to get to 300 strikeouts this year. I don't know that he's going to get the opportunity to do that, but he's certainly on pace to do so. As for the offense, came on late, a quiet first game, and they were quiet for most of the second game as well. Just 1 run in the first inning. Ronnie got picked off, perhaps cost them from scoring a little bit more in that first inning. And then it was pretty much crickets from the offense until Michael Harris hit his first of 2 home runs. That answered the Angels tying the game at 1. And then Michael Harris came right back and gave the Braves a lead with that home run. I mentioned this on the postcast, which you can check out over on Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube or in the Locked On Braves podcast feed. I mentioned on there, before that at bat, I was looking at Michael Harris' stats coming up the plate, and he only had 9 home runs on the season. I know he was dreadful for pretty much the first 2 months of the year and had some injuries as well and there that really prevented him from getting going. That back, I'm sure, was zapping some of his power, but I thought to myself, this is a guy who should be easily a 2020 player annually. And he goes out, hits his 10th home run. That's the 9th player the Braves have had reach double-digit home runs this year. When Travis d'Arnaud hits his next one, the Braves will have, for the first time ever, have 10 players with double-digit home runs, which is just insane to think about. But Michael Harris, he should be a 2020 machine each and every year. After this game, he's now up to 11 home runs and 13 stolen bases, so we'll see if he gets there. But glad to see him get that home run stroke going. Again, there's just too much speed, too much power, too much athleticism, too much talent for him not to be a perennial 2020 type player. So good to see him get those 2 home runs. Eddie had a pinch hit single and then an Arcia home run later in the game that kind of broke things up a little bit. And Michael Harris hit his 2nd home run of the game. After that point, great job, Eddie, coming off the bench. It's exactly what I talked about. I'm fine with Kevin Pillar starting and putting him 7th, 8th in the lineup, wherever you want to put him. He wants to bat 240 whatever. Righties, lefties. I know he should probably mainly just start against lefties, but I'm fine with that for the defensive aspect of it. And then you save Eddie Rosario for an at-bat later in the game where you need him, just like this. And he comes off the bench, he gets a pinch hit single, he scores on a home run, and then get him out of the game because there was a ball in the next inning that drops in that had no business dropping in. He just can't play in the field right now. He is just so bad at getting jumps on balls. His closing speed is not good at all. So I'm fine using Eddie Rosario off the bench. Look, that bat's valuable, especially in big spots, but you got to get him out of there defensively because it's hard to watch him out there. You got Forrest Wall on the bench. Sam Hilliard's making a rehab assignment right now. Hopefully when he comes back, you'll have him that you can put back out there, but he just can't play defensively at the moment. It is just too much of a liability out there. Olsen just missed a 2-run homer in this one. He really felt like it was fair, and I know he's biased, but that really, cost him there. He's crushing the baseball, ended up striking out in that at bat. He had to feel like he missed out on one. He certainly felt like it was fair, but he hit it so high that you just couldn't tell. I know a lot of you have mentioned this. How is it 2023 and we don't have some sort of laser technology running up the foul pole to tell if these balls are fair or foul? I don't know. That's a great question. MLB is really slow on making some of these technological adjustments, but he certainly crushed that ball. Wish you would have got it, to be fair. Every spot in the lineup had either a hit or a walk. Again, talking about just the depth of this lineup, everybody contributing, getting on base. A-squad bullpen shuts it down. I mentioned Jimenez coming in the 7th to get out of trouble. Minter gets the top of the order, starting with Ohtani. Pitched for the second day in a row coming off the IL. I thought that was a bit of a questionable move, but he's able to get through that inning, and I'm sure he's going to be off on Wednesday. Then you got the off day on Thursday to get him some rest. And then Iglesias with a 6-pitch 9th inning. Wasn't a safe situation, but Snitker deciding, to go with the A-squad bullpen right then. And I feel like that's what it's going to be. Jimenez, Minter, Iglesias. That is your 7th, 8th, 9th inning right now. And it looked pretty good on Tuesday night. All right. Well, even a little bit longer than I had planned to in that first segment. But next, I want to get into all the trade deadline discussion, what the Braves did do, what they didn't do, who did the most, who improved the most. We'll talk about all of that here next. Are you using a Sleeper app for daily fantasy baseball? If you're not, you certainly should be. Sleeper is a fantasy sports plus real money gaming app focused on bringing people together through sports and gaming. Sleeper has become the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the world with over 5 million active users in 2022, while also earning some of the highest levels of engagement per user in the industry. And if you want 100 times your money on daily fantasy baseball, Sleeper is now offering up to a 100 times payout for up to an 8-pick contest. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Braves will try to win the series against the Angels on Wednesday afternoon starting at 12:20 p.m. Eastern. So you got to listen to this podcast soon before that game starts. Catch every pitch of the Braves hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Braves. All right, trade deadline came and went on Tuesday. Not a lot of action from the Braves standpoint. They made one small move in the morning, trading for left-handed reliever Brad Hand. It is our stat of the day Wednesday, so our stat of the day today is 3 because that's the number of additions the Braves made at the trade deadline. I know technically they made 4 trades if you include the Taylor Hearn one and then flipping Hearn for Nicky Lopez, but really 3 trade deadline additions for the Braves. Pierce Johnson, he has elite stuff. That curveball is nasty. We've seen that. He has a chance to be a 6th, 7th inning guy and mix in close games, whether the Braves are, up a run, down a run, and that 6th, 7th inning. I think he's somebody that can come in there, especially if, Jimenez or Minter needs a day off. I think he can pitch that 7th, 8th inning role. So I think he, could be in that, back setup guy type of mix. I think he has that type of stuff. Nicky Lopez, elite defense at several different positions. He's played left field, shortstop, third base, second base, and first base. I think when we originally got him, I said first base was the only place that he doesn't play. He does actually play first base, not a ton, but he does have some experience there. So he can play all over, and he's a really good defender pretty much wherever you put him. He had a good offensive season in 2021. I had somebody point that out to me, but that is a huge outlier when you look at the other seasons that he's played at the big league level. A good walk rate this year, generally puts the ball in play. Again, I don't think the Braves will be relying on him too much defensively. He was basically just a bench replacement over Culberson, somebody you could bring in for defense if you need to. If somebody were to get hurt, you at least have somebody to come in and play good defense at that spot on the infield. And then the move that they made on Tuesday, getting reliever Brad Hand from the Rockies, veteran. He's pitched in big games, really tough on lefties. Lefties are hitting just 143 against him this year and just 190 for his career, which is a long career. You got to be sure, though, when he comes in that he's going to face a lefty. You got to make sure it's not a situation where team's going to pinch hit. They got a righty waiting on the bench for him. When he comes in, you got to make sure he's facing a lefty, and you got to make sure that he gets him out because numbers are not nearly as good against right-handed hitters. So, again, he still has something that he's really good at, getting out lefties. He's a veteran with a lot of experience, possibly gives you a third lefty in the bullpen when Dylan leaves back, and now with AJ Minter. So could be a very good pickup. Again, you got a spot in the sixth, seventh, maybe even the fifth, as early as the fifth inning. You got a big lefty coming up in a big situation. You can go to Brad Hand, see if you can get out of that, or you got an inning where there's two lefties coming up. Then maybe you go to Brad Hand there to try to get you through that inning. So another lefty specialist, nothing major. I asked the question, were the needs addressed? And no, not really. They needed a dominant setup reliever. Maybe Pierce Johnson fits that role. I don't think he takes over Joe Jimenez right now or AJ Minter. Like I said, I think he could maybe substitute for one of them if they need a day off. But if you're in the postseason, maybe he gets the sixth inning. Maybe he's that fourth guy behind Jimenez, Minter, and Iglesias. I think he certainly has a case for that spot. So to me, it wasn't exactly the dominant reliever that I was looking for. And I think you needed a starter of some sort. You didn't have to get a Verlander or a Scherzer, even an Eduardo Rodriguez, who ended up not getting moved. But I felt like they needed a Jordan Montgomery. I felt like they needed a Michael Lorenzen. I felt like they needed somebody for the middle to back of that rotation just to improve the depth, at least for the regular season. Even if it wasn't a guy you were going to use in the postseason, even just to get somebody to give you some innings to get through the regular season. I felt like they needed one of those guys. Getting somebody in left field, I thought was always, kind of a pipe dream and something that I don't think there was really anybody out there that made sense that was available. But they didn't really get the dominant setup reliever that I was looking for, and they didn't get any starting pitching depth unless you want to include Chirinos in that, which I don't because they just picked him up off the scrap heap. So wasn't necessarily a trade deadline move in my estimation. So I would say were needs addressed? I would say no. I would say Alex Anthopoulos didn't address the needs at the trade deadline. Reason for the lack of moves and not seeing Alex do a lot here, my market price was really high. And Alex Anthopoulos, and he talked about this a little bit on the broadcast Tuesday, he wasn't going to give up one of their limited assets unless it was going to be for someone who can make a significant impact. And that's what I was saying throughout a lot of this trade deadline. I'm sure everybody that Alex talked to, they wanted either AJ Smith-Shawver or Vaughn Grissom, or they wanted, an Owen Murphy, a J.R. Ritchie. I'm not going to give up one of those guys unless I'm getting an everyday player, unless I'm getting a middle of the rotation starter with years of control. And I just think the asking prices were way too high, and Alex wasn't willing to give up the limited assets the Braves do have unless it was going to be for a solid everyday player, somebody you could plug in that was going to be better than what the Braves have. And that's something to consider as well. What the Braves have is already really good. Who are you bringing in that's better than Sean Murphy, Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies, Orlando Arcia, Austin Riley, Michael Harris, Ron Acuna Jr., and, as much grief as we give Eddie Rosario, I don't really think there was too many players out there that were much better than him. Bellinger was the one we talked about that I think made the most sense. But other than that, again, Randall Grichuk, who the Angels ended up getting, I just don't think there were a lot of outfielders moved that made a lot of sense. They were a lot better than what the Braves already had. Certainly you could say so on the pitching side of things, and that's what everybody was going for. And that's, there also weren't a lot of sellers at this deadline, which drove up the price for a lot of these players as well. And we know Alex Anthopoulos is not somebody that is going to overreact to the market and overpay. We've seen it in free agency. We've seen it in trades as well. And I said coming in, Alex has still yet to make a big prospect move at a trade deadline. He usually works on the margins. He brings in depth, and that's what he usually does at the trade deadline. We've seen him in the offseason now make a couple of big moves for Sean Murphy and Matt Olson. But other than that, he really doesn't trade a lot of his big prospects, especially not at the trade deadline. Again, I just don't think there was an outfielder out there or an outfielder traded that I thought would have been a significant upgrade over what Eddie Rosario already gives you, which is, a 750 OPS guy. I know he's terrible defensively. The Braves have to work on how they address that and how they use him. D-backs gave up a pretty good package for Paul Sewald. That's somebody, I would have liked to get, but I don't think the Braves really could have matched that package. Blue Jays gave up their 7th ranked prospect and a pitcher with 105 strikeouts and 89 innings at AA this year for Jordan Hicks, for a rental in Jordan Hicks. That's what they gave up. That was the price for a rental in Jordan Hicks. I don't think they were ever really going to get Scherzer or Verlander, not just to the complications of working with somebody in the division, but you look at the money taken on and the prospects that the Mets got back in that deal, which I'll talk about here more in a second, because I think the Mets got bailed out at this trade deadline. Lorenzen was one I thought made a lot of sense, but the Phillies gave up their 5th ranked prospect for him. I think who they gave up there, I think he's probably similar to Vaughn Grissom. And, is that going to be the price for Michael Lorenzen? Was that what the Braves were willing to do, give up Vaughn Grissom for Lorenzen? I think that price may have been a little too high. I don't think the money is the issue, but FanGraphs currently has the Braves luxury tax payroll at $245 million. The threshold for this year is $233 million. So the Braves are already in the luxury tax. That second tier is $253 million. So were they wanting to stay, below that second tier? I don't know. Again, I don't know that money played too much into this. I just think the prospect packages were too high, too expensive for what was out there. And I just think Alex wasn't willing to pay those prices when it wasn't for somebody that was going to significantly upgrade this team. And so that's why I feel like the Braves and Alex didn't really make a lot of moves. It also wasn't necessary. I talked about this on yesterday's podcast. If there's one team who's already built and deep and ready to go for the postseason, it is the Braves. Especially, again, you consider what's coming back in Max Fried. They just got AJ Minter back, Dylan Lee coming back, possibly Kyle Wright, Jesse Chavez, Nick Anderson. There's nobody in baseball that I can think of that has those 6 guys, pitchers, that are coming back off injury that can make that much of an impact. And yes, you're counting on all those guys coming back healthy and playing a big part. And that's a big if, but still, you got to trust your doctors. You got to trust what you're seeing in their rehab to feel like they can come back. And that's what Alex basically said. He talked to his guys and they feel like there's a good chance that those guys come back and they are who they were before. And if that's the case, this is the best and deepest team on paper in baseball, and they're capable of winning a World Series. So trade deadline, great. I give them a D- because, like I said, needs really weren't addressed. Do I think it's going to ultimately crush the Braves? No, I don't think so, because I think this team already was pretty deep, and it was going to be hard to really bring in anybody that was going to make a significant impact and be a significant upgrade on this team. A lot of you may disagree with that. Please let me know down in the comment section below. I saw a lot of you on Twitter saying this is a complete and utter failure by Alex Anthopoulos. I do not believe that, even though I give him a D- just because needs weren't addressed. But I think a lot of that kind of out of his hand. And I think a lot of that was probably the right move, not to give up what assets you do have just to make, marginal upgrades. If they are upgrades at all, it really just would have been depth moves. There weren't a lot of players moved that I thought really would have significantly upgraded this team. And I think the depth is just fine that the Braves have at the moment. Looking around the league, big moves that were made. I thought the Mets had a great trade deadline. Look, if you're out of it, I thought the Mets and Cardinals did really good. They're out of it. They're teams who are hoping to contend soon. They traded off all their assets they have, especially rental players. They got some good prospects in return, hopefully turn things around quickly for them. I thought the Mets did fantastic at this trade deadline, and I hate to say that. They got rid of Scherzer and Verlander contracts. Yes, they're still paying a good chunk of money on those, but in those 2 deals, they got 3 really good prospects. They got Acuna's brother. Sorry, I can't say his first name. They got two really good outfield prospects from the Astros and that Verlander deal. I feel like that's a bailout for the Mets. You had those two big contracts with Scherzer and Verlander. You get out from under those, and you get three really, really good prospects. I hate that. I hate that for the Mets. They also were able to trade Pham for a 17-year-old lottery ticket type prospect. They got the Angels' 9th ranked prospect for Dominic Leone. They got the Brewers' 30th ranked prospect for Mark Canha. They got the 18th and 21st ranked prospects from the Marlins for David Robertson. I mean, the Mets did fantastic at this trade deadline. I know their fans don't like it. They're out of it. But I thought they had the best trade deadline of any team in baseball, sellers or buyers. I thought the Mets absolutely raked in at this trade deadline. So good for them. I hate it for the Braves and for the division. Also, for the Braves, it may be a little bit where the Mets are actually competitive again. We'll see what they do in the offseason. But as far as, maximizing on where they are and getting some return, I thought they did fantastic at this deadline. Rangers got Max Scherzer, Jordan Montgomery, and Chris Stratton at the deadline. They also got Aroldis Chapman a while back as well. And they got some depth at catcher with Austin Hedges, with Jonah Heim being out right now. So I thought the Rangers had a really good trade deadline. Good to see them going for it. That AL West is going to be just a fight because you look, the Astros got Verlander and they got Kendall Graveman. The Angels got they got Leone, who I talked about a minute ago from the Mets. They got CJ Cron, Randall Grichuk, Lucas Giolito, who the Braves will see on Wednesday. And they got Renato Lopez, who the Braves already saw in this series. So that NL West is going to be a lot of fun down the stretch. The Rays got Aaron Savali. Know how good the Rays have been, but they have had some injury issues in the starting rotation. Now you get Savali in there to match with McClanahan and the rest of that pitching staff that they have. Even though they are injured, they still have a lot of really good arms. So I thought that was a great move for the Rays. You look on the flip side of that, and the Guardians, who were somewhat sellers at this trade line, but they trade Aaron Savali. They get Kyle Manzardo, who's first baseman, who is MLB ready, one of the best prospects in all of baseball. And they got Khalil Watson from the Marlins. So they got two really good prospects. Watson struggled a little bit so far in pro baseball, but he was thought to be the steal of his draft when the Marlins got him. So I thought the Guardians did pretty well to getting two really good prospects. Dodgers got Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, Ahmed Rosario, Kike Hernandez. They were denied Eduardo Rodriguez, which is big because if they get him, I feel like it kind of changes everything we look at in the National League. Because you look at all those teams I just talked about who were buyers, other than the Mets, nobody really did anything good at the deadline in the National League. Diamondbacks made some marginal moves to get some depth pieces. And I mentioned the moves that the Dodgers made, but nobody in the National League really ever made that big move, I thought, to move the needle in the National League. But I think it's good for the Braves. But if the Dodgers get Eduardo Rodriguez, I think that makes a little bit of a difference there. I still think the Dodgers are going to be the main contender for the Braves in the National League. But again, Braves didn't do much, but neither did really anybody else in the National League. Most of the big moves went to the American League, where they got Scherzer and Verlander. So that's something to consider as well when you're looking at this trade deadline for the Braves, is that they really weren't pushed by anybody in the National League because nobody else really made any major moves in the National League either. So that's your trade deadline review. I'm sure you have some thoughts. Let me know down in the comment section below on Twitter, and I'd love to continue that discussion with you. Next, we got game 3 of the Angels and the Braves coming up real quickly here on Wednesday. We'll preview that here next. On Wednesday afternoon, it'll be Lucas Giolito, who the Angels just traded for, against Yonny Chirinos, who the Braves just acquired. Both of these pitchers making their second appearance with their new teams. Giolito, fastball, slider, changeup, went 5 1/3 his last time out. Again, his first start with the Angels, that was up in Toronto. Gave up 6 hits, 1 walk, 3 earned, 2 home runs, 5 strikeouts. He's been hit or miss this season. 14 starts, he's given up 2 earned or less, which is really good, but he's had 6 starts where he's given up 4 earned or more. So again, even though his last start was kind of an in-between start, 3 earned runs, it's really either been great for Giolito or pretty bad for Giolito. Hopefully the Braves get the bad version on Wednesday afternoon. As for Chirinos, how does he use that splitter? Talked about it last time. It's a really good pitch for him. Does he throw it more? Can he use it enough to get through a lineup a third time? Can he get through 5 innings, go a little bit deeper into this game? Bullpen, other than Minter, should be ready to go. I would imagine we're going to see some sort of combination of Chirinos, Heller, McHugh, Tonkin, Yates in this one. Again, hopefully the offense can score a bunch of runs. I don't have much hope for Chirinos, but I'd love to see again what he does with that splitter because it is a really good pitch for him. Maybe he doesn't work out as a starter, but again, maybe you move him to some sort of reliever role if that pitch is good enough. I mentioned Brad Hand. He was added to the roster. Daysville Hernandez was moved to the IL with elbow inflammation. Really hate to see that for a guy coming off Tommy John. Was looking really good coming up in the minor league ranks. Got moved up to Atlanta and made his debut there. Had some impressive stuff, but unfortunately injured. Hopefully there's nothing major there for him and he can get back soon. Braves again will try to win the series against the Angels on Wednesday afternoon starting at 12:20 p.m. Eastern. Catch every pitch of the Braves hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Braves. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of each and every day. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. You can follow me at Shortstop Ball. Also, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.